jump in. Let me share my screen here and we'll get started. Donna, if you missed Pluto, that's okay. We're going to get Pluto back here today. That's half of the goal of the project. All right. So let's talk about what we're going to be doing. It looks like we have a lot of objectives, but really this ends up being a conglomerate of sort of two overarching, I guess, goals of today, which would be this first 5 objectives here are talking about collection views and what they are, how they work. And luckily, for the most part, these are fairly similar to table views as well. So it's not like there's a huge learning curve. Once you know how to do table views, like we saw yesterday, you can basically do a picker view the same way. And a collection view is even more similar to a table view yet. So this is all going to be talking about, that kind of stuff there. And then we're going to be talking also about user defaults for these last 3 objectives here, which is a way that we can persist information. And a kind of a key thing here is this first objective for user default says, understand and explain the purpose of user defaults and the kind of information it should be used to store. So we're going to kind of really dive deep on that because this is going to be a second form of persistence. You guys saw earlier this week where we used file manager and we saved things to a plist. User defaults is just another method of doing a similar thing, although there is a very specific time to use it. So we'll kind of be going into that. So it doesn't sort of get abused like it can be as a junior developer. So that's kind of our goal here. Let me show you the project that we're going to be making. So Donna, that was perfect that you said that because that's exactly kind of what we're going to be doing here today in the project. So we're going to be building a simple looking collection view app where it shows a list of all of the planets in a collection view format like we see here. And we have this settings view controller where I can say, should Pluto be a planet, yes or no? And then when I go back, then it's going to be a part of the collection view. So we get Pluto back or not. It's kind of up to us if we want to have it be there or not. So that's going to kind of get us into user defaults. So, oh yeah, so the whole thing with that is if I close the app here and rerun it, Pluto's still a planet. I don't have to recheck that. Sorry, I don't have to recheck that or flip that switch or anything. So that's kind of the goal here. And if we have time, you'll see that the collection view doesn't look necessarily fantastic. If we have time, we'll talk about kind of how to make things look really good on any device with the collection view, or if not, I can just give you a little code snippet or maybe do an extra video if I haven't already recorded one already for it. So, but at the very least, we're going to get these planets to show up on our collection view here. So that's kind of the goal of today's project. All right, so let's go over what we have to begin with. We'll start here with the planet.swift. We've got the model that is going to hold our, there we go. So we've got the model that's going to hold our name for a planet and also the image for the planet. And then we are simply going to write out in this planet controller a hard-coded array of planets. These planets aren't really subject to change very often, aside from adding Pluto or not. So just having a hard-coded is fine for this project. There's no reason to go any more in depth on that. I guess if we wanted to expand this out to like our entire galaxy or something, or add other planets that aren't necessarily in our solar system, we could definitely think about, okay, maybe we need to add some sort of a CRUD method to create a planet and everything. But for what we're doing today of just showing these planets on the collection view, That's great. That's really all we need here. And then the last thing that is kind of done for us is the storyboard, which is, oh, sorry, just the second part. Oh yeah, that makes sense. We need to do the collection view ourselves. So we've just got this, this setup here to have our done button. We may do it a little bit differently than the than this done button that we have down here. I want to talk about why there's kind of a new iOS 13, not necessarily problem, but a quirk that you run into with this new style of presenting a view controller. So we'll get to that kind of towards the end here. So let's talk about collection views first of all. I go into UI Collection View. Collection views are super, super powerful, and I can't remember if it's said in one of the videos or if it's linked in training kits somewhere. There's this WWDC session from Apple that goes over sort of the introduction to collection views, and it shows that they're really, really powerful. But at sort of their, I suppose, the most base form, they are a way for you to show things in sort of this grid layout that we kind of see here. Oops, let me pull up the simulator, there we go. So we can kind of customize the way that these cells themselves look. However, they're sort of laid out in a format that's either, you know, from left to right like this, and then it goes down and it keeps going like that, and so on. Or you can actually have it go the other way, where the cool part is with the collection view, it automatically will, you know, add scrolling just like a table view would. If there are more collection view cells, we also call these cells, then can fit on the screen at once. One cool thing about a collection view, however, is you can make it automatically, it's just one property that you change to make it scroll horizontally. So if you guys have seen in like Instagram, for example, or Facebook or something, where there's like the stories kind of little circles up here at the top, and you can kind of scroll through people's stories and everything. That's just a collection view. It's just a horizontally scrolling collection view, or at the very least, that's how I would implement it. And Facebook kind of does their own weird thing. But if you wanted to do something that visually looks the same, you could just do it with a collection view. It's really easy. So there's a lot of kind of power along with collection views. However, they're all kind of dictated, at least the way that you place the cells on the screen, by what is called a layout. And in that WWDC video, that's where they start to talk about, hey, if you want to customize the way that your, you know, your cells are laid out, and not in a grid, but in some other way, you would write your own custom layout. I think they show some pictures of like arranging cells in a circle, some like fanning out like a bunch of cards, like cells as if they were cards on like a poker table or something. There's a ton you can do with it. The one that we will use 99% of the time, because one, it's built in, and a lot of times that grid layout is desirable. It's something that is sort of a natural thing. It's called the flow layout, and it's just built in. Oh. Okay, there's another earthquake happening.
Get to safety.
What's that?
Get to safety.
Yeah, don't worry about class.
I think it's over.
That is wild.
No, I didn't feel an earthquake.
You didn't feel it? Oh, man. That was freaky. Okay, it wasn't as bad as the last one, though. Okay, we're good. I think it's over. Sorry about that.
Super chill about it, Spencer.
Oh my god.
I don't know. It wasn't that bad. Could you see it shaking? Whew, man, okay.
Yes.
Cool. Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. I've never felt an earthquake in my life here in Utah, except for like these last couple weeks here, which is crazy. But okay, sorry about that. So this flow layout here, it's just this grid pattern, and that's what you'll have 99% of the time. And if you really, really wanted to, you could, go more in depth on creating your own custom layout. There's actually a really cool layout that I'll send a link to that came out with iOS 13 that is somewhat of, it's almost like you mix a grid pattern with a stack view in a sense. It's really cool. You get a little bit more flexibility without having to write a ton of code. So I'll give you a link to that next time. So anyway, that's essentially kind of the thing with the collection views is we really just dictate what the cells look like, whether we want it to scroll vertically or horizontally. And there's a little bit more customization that you can do. And you can just sort of say, you know, I want the cells to be, I want there to always be, you know, 6 cells depending, or no matter what the size of the collection view is. You can get really complex with these collection views here. So, okay, let's get back into the lesson, guys. So let's go ahead and jump into the storyboard here. And in the object library, I'm going to find a collection view controller. We use a collection view controller today, but basically the same rules apply for a table view controller that apply for a collection view controller. So a collection view controller will have the delegate set up for you. So in the view to load, you don't have to say, you know, collectionView.delegate equals self or collectionView.dataSource equals self. However, if you want to use a collection view in a normal UI view controller, then you would have to set the delegate and data source yourself. So just keep that in mind. It behaves exactly in that sense like a table view would. So we'll drag this out here. And we kind of see something a little bit different. If I click on this cell here, I'm just going to pull up the document outline so we can see. I'm on the cell right now. There's no place in the attributes inspector for a style like a table view would have. That's one key difference is the table views have those 4 cell styles that kind of come for free without you having to make a custom cell. However, with a collection view, you always have to make a custom cell. There is no sort of built-in cell. So you kind of have to take it on yourself to do it, which is fine. It's not a ton more work, but that's just one thing to keep in mind. There's a little more setup than just a basic table view. And we see on the cell, we kind of get these little anchor points that we can drag around to resize it. If you don't particularly like using these anchor points and getting like a precise number, you can always go into the size inspector and change the cell size here. So let's do something like, we'll do maybe 150 by 170 or so. Really what I'm looking for is it should just be a little bit taller than it is wide. And we can kind of mess around with this as we go, but that'll be good for now. Whoops, sorry. Okay, does everyone have that? All right. So from here, we can, this just has a content view, which is just, if we look in the identity inspector, it's just a UI view. So we can put in anything we want. So let's just make it match what we have in the solution here. So what do we need?
Nine cells.
Label.
Labels.
Yeah, labels.
The UI photo and a label.
Okay, sorry. A label and what?
Oh, photo. I think the object is called UI photo.
Yeah, close. UI image view.
UI image. Yeah.
So yeah, let's drag out a label. I'll kind of throw it down here closer to the bottom. and we'll grab a image view. I'll drag that down here. Here's one thing with the image view. It kind of defaults to this little kind of, I don't know, like 4x3-ish rectangle. You just kind of need to click on it and get the anchor points to kind of resize it here. And you'll want to make sure that you kind of resize it to be all fitting within the cell. It doesn't have to be perfect here, but sometimes when we start constraining things, if it's not completely inside the cell, the constraints kind of go backwards and they get a little bit mixed up. So I just tend to make sure that if I'm constraining something, I make sure it's completely within the view before I try to constrain it. So for this, we could just do this. I'm just going to say, let's go, and again, I tend to use the pin menu, but if you want to use the control and drag to constrain, that's completely fine. I'm just going to say, let's do 8 points on the top. We'll do 8 points on the leading, 8 points on the trailing. Okay, so I want you guys to tell me here, why is it yelling at me? And probably you.
It's not constrained to the label yet.
Yeah, that's, I mean, you're not wrong. But why is that an issue?
It doesn't know how far to be away from it.
Okay. So let's go through the X, Y, width, and height. Does it have an X position? Yes, it does, right? The 2 leading and trailing constraints are giving it an X position. Does it have a Y position?
From the top, I think.
It does have a Y position. We're saying it always needs to be 8 points from the top of our cell. So there's a Y position. Does it have a width?
No.
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
it does, right?
okay.
Again, these leading and trailing things are going to make sure that it stays 8 points on both sides, which will then stretch it out and give it a width. Does it have a height?
No.
No. So that's the problem, right? So like Stephanie's suggesting, we could constrain it to the label. That would be good. We could, I want to talk about one constraint that I haven't mentioned just because I think this is a decent time to do it. Let's go over to the image view in the pin menu. Right here at the bottom, it says aspect ratio. Go ahead and click that. And I'll show you another way that you can do this as well. And then it's going to give you these numbers here, and yours may be slightly different than mine, and that's okay. So mine says like 64 to 67. So this is the aspect ratio of its width to its height, or vice versa. If we go over to the size inspector, you can click the edit button on this aspect ratio constraint. And then change this multiplier here. If we want it to be square, for example, we could do 1:1. And then that says, the width has to be the same as the height, for example. Or if you wanted it to be, twice as tall, then you do 1 to 2. Obviously, that doesn't make sense in our case, but you can mess around with this really easily. And so whenever the width changes, the height is going to scale automatically as well. So proportionally, it will stay the same, which is kind of cool.
Do images get formatted, or do they get squished or cut off to kind of fit to that aspect ratio?
The images?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's actually look at that. So we're actually going to run into a problem here when we do this, which is a good problem to run into because we need to know how to fix it. So if you go into the attributes inspector, you can click on this image dropdown and just put in any image. I'll just put in Earth. It's the first one here. And by default now, it didn't used to be like this. The content mode here is what dictates how that scales. So aspect fit is probably going to be the thing that you use the most. It used to be scale to fill, which I didn't particularly like. It doesn't actually look bad on this one, but if I do like, I think Saturn, for example, aspect fit would make it stay the same, you know, it wouldn't like skew it, it wouldn't stretch it. Scale to fill is just going to try to fit as much of it as it can, but it will skew it, which isn't generally what you want. So you tend to use aspect fit or aspect fill. Now what aspect fill will do is it will keep the same aspect ratio. However, it will try to fill out the whole size of the image view, which means it can cut off things like we see here with Saturn. So leaving it at aspect fit is the thing that's going to guarantee that nothing gets cut off. It's basically kind of the thing there. Is any? Oh, sorry, go for it.
I was gonna ask you, please show how do you put that the image on the image right there?
Yeah. So it's just right here on the image view. Once you click on the image view, go to the attributes inspector, and it's just this little thing. You just click this drop down here, and it'll give you a list of the images that we have.
Thank you.
Great question. Oh, just for your information, those images are coming from the assets folder. They're just in here.
Yeah, I seen them. I was just wondering. I was trying to like drag it, but I couldn't. So.
Oh, gotcha. So if we wanted to, you know, we could make it so that it's constrained to the label. That would be completely fine. I just wanted to show the aspect ratio constraint because we haven't formally talked about that yet. All right, so then let's just constrain our label here. And we can just go, you know, like it's saying 7 points from the bottom of our image view, which I think is fine. I'll just leave it there. And then I'll just do like 8 on the leading and trailing. And then 0 or so on the bottom. It doesn't, you know, again, these are, if you don't quite have these numbers, that's okay. It's not going to affect anything. As long as there's space for the, sorry, I just got rid of that. As long as there's space for the label to show its content, that's really all we care about right now. And then the text of the label is justified on the left, which is fine. But if we want to center justify or align it, there is this alignment property on the label once you select the label. And we can just use the second one in this segmented control, which is the, yeah.
My label's like off the screen.
Okay.
It's like under the image view.
Me too.
Yeah, mine did the same.
Okay, cool. It's like that, or it's, do you mean like it's off the screen like that?
It's like on top of the image.
Yeah, it's like under it.
Yeah, mine too in the center almost.
Interesting. Does someone mind sharing their screen? We can take a look. Oh, interesting. Okay. Let's see. It's like it didn't. That's really weird. Can you try? Let's see. Let's height is 1. Sorry about that, guys. Let's try, just hit Command Z and let's pull out those constraints there. There we go. So let's maybe just try pulling up the label just a little bit before you try to constrain it. Yeah, like, let's try that. And yeah, like for the top and the bottom, just leave it as it is, like 3 and 4, that's great. Okay, and then you'll just wanna, on the trailing space, you just did 58 instead of 8. You can just hit the edit button there. And change that to 8. Perfect. I don't know what happened. It could be that we were a little bit too low on the, let me show you. Right here, it may be that the label was just a little bit too low, like it was outside of here and it was causing a little bit of conflict. I'm not quite sure like why mine worked, for example, and yours didn't. Will you give me a yes or a no when yours is, well, will you just give me a yes when yours is working in that participants list? Weird. Yeah, that might be, if it keeps causing an issue, you might, well.
I had to like control from the label, control drag to the earth, and then for some reason it let me set them.
Okay.
Like I didn't do anything with my control, but just like.
Yeah, just go like that. Okay, interesting. Is anyone having issues with it still?
Yeah, mine still keeps going back to underneath.
Weird.
Yeah, same with me.
So just, have you tried to drag it up a little bit and then constrain it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what mine was doing, and then I like control drag to the image, but then I just canceled adding any type of like vertical spacing, and then it like recognized the image after that.
Oh, you know what you might try is, if you have the constraints, even if they look weird, can you just like, you can click on the cell and just like try to change its size just a little bit and then change it back and see if they're actually fine. It may just actually be the storyboard that's kind of being finicky here.
My Xcode crashed. Could it be a bug or something weird?
It could be. Here, let me do this just for anyone that's having any problems, just because I want to jump into kind of the rest of the project here. I will give you what I have so far. I know it's not ideal. 3.3, interesting. Dang, sorry guys that you guys are having all these crashes. That's weird.
I had actually resized the the size of the label and then move it around, and then it allowed me to do it, if that helps anybody, I guess.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Yeah, I think it's not anything that you're doing wrong. I think Xcode, it just, you know, is a little finicky. Xcode's an app, it's buggy. That's just how it is, unfortunately. Okay, so let's now go ahead and make a custom cell file, a custom, like a CocoaTouch file for our cell here, so we can create the outlets to our image view and our label. And let's create some CocoaTouch files for these view controllers here as well. So go ahead and do Command N, make a CocoaTouch file. Make this a subclass of UI collection we can do the UI collection view controller first, that's fine. So let's call the collection view controller planets collection view controller. I want to talk about this grouping because I realized we didn't talk about that when I said we would. So we'll make all these files and then we'll kind of regroup everything here. Make another subclass of just a UI collection view cell now this time, just for the individual cell here. So let's just call this planet collection view cell. That's kind of what the cell is going to be showing. Again, trying to be as descriptive as possible. And then finally, we'll make one more that's just a subclass of UI view controller for our settings here. And let's just call it settings view controller. So as far as organization goes, I apologize that we haven't talked about this up to this point. There's a few different ways that you can organize your project, and I think it really comes down to partially a personal preference. I think some form of organization is definitely better than none. So however makes sense to you is, first of all, I think the most important thing. From there, I think it depends a little bit on how you want to do it, but also the size of your project. So as an example here, we can see we've already got some folders or groups made. So like for view controllers, model controller, resources is kind of the catch-all for everything else. So let's put our planets collection view controller. You can just click and drag it up and move it into the view controllers folder if yours isn't there already. And I'll also put the settings there. And then the cell doesn't actually really fit into any of these groups that we have here. Does anyone know what we might call a group that would fit our cell here?
Maybe a view?
Yeah, exactly. If we're kind of following this pattern of MVC with models, model controller, view controller, we don't have any views folder. So you can either right click on the file that you want to put in that group, which is what I tend to do. So I'm going to right click my planet collection view cell here, or you can hold control and just click normally. And I'm going to go new group from selection here. And what that will do is create a new folder, but also immediately throw that view, that cell file into the group. And then I can just call this. It should pull up the name of the group in a little text field. And I can immediately edit that to say like views or view. And then this folder, at least for me, is inside of my resources folder, and I don't particularly like that. So what I'm going to do is just kind of drag it up out of that and maybe put it like above my view controllers. So views and view controllers are close together, model controller close together. I would say this is a really like simple, basic way of organizing your files as you start out. Although as you start to get into much larger and larger projects, it isn't necessarily feasible to keep it like this. I don't have a fantastic example. I'll pull up one of my personal projects, but it's not super large. But from here, there's nothing saying you can't also make more groups, or some people will organize their groups by like feature. So for example, you would maybe have like a profile group, and then within that you would have like models, views, and controllers for specifically the profile. So however you want to organize it is fine. It's just that some organization is better than none, for sure. So
Does app delegate have to be outside of a subfolder?
no,
Yeah.
I don't actually know why it is outside the subfolder. I was looking at that. There is one thing with the info.plist, however, that will break your project sort of if you move it into a folder like it is here. I'll show you how to fix that in a bit if we have time, where I can just share an article on it. So this is a personal project of mine. So this project is basically one view controller. It's not super large, although there's a lot going on with it, and there's a lot of code here. So you can see here, I've just got a bunch of my views. I've got my view controllers, and then I have subfolders within these to kind of even more clean it up as well. So that can be a really nice way to keep things even cleaner than, even looking at this, it's like, I kind of have to scan to find the right view that I'm looking for. So I could definitely do a better job of that here. So that's great. And then, again, if you get into a larger project, it would probably be more likely grouped by feature or something like that. Any questions on organization here? Okay. So if anything, what I'll do is when I start a project, I will generally just go up to this first folder here, and then you can just right click it and just say new group. And that will put a group sort of on the right level. And then you can just keep do that, make a few groups, call them models, views, controllers, or do it by feature. And then as you add a file, just watch me here. I'm not actually going to keep this file. You can actually choose the group that you want this to go into. So immediately, if I'm like, oh, this is a model, I can just say, I want it to go into the model folder, so I don't have to go in and drag it into the right folder later on, which is cool. So, all right, let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll jump back into the collection view. See you guys in a few minutes. Okay, welcome back. Go ahead and turn on your camera so I know you're here, and we'll jump back in.
Is that a navigation bar at the bottom? Do we change the done button?
Right here. It's a toolbar, although I don't think we're going to use it. This is from a kind of a different solution project.
Okay.
So we're going to have that done button up here, and that's if that's what you have, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, we all good to go? Okay, cool. All right, so let's jump back in. Well, yeah, first of all, let's just go to the storyboard, and then we'll pull up the assistant editor in just a second. So let's set out the classes of our view controllers here and our cell as well. So just go up to our collection view controller in the identity inspector. We'll set this as a planets collection view controller and hit enter there. We'll do the same thing for our settings view controller. That should already actually be done for us. If you name the settings view controller anything other than settings view controller, how I have it here, you will need to make sure that it's changed here as well, because the starter project just kind of assumes that the class is called settings view controller.
So where's the scene delegate? And there's supposed to be one, or?
Oh, yeah, so the scene delegate is relatively new. It's like an iOS 13 thing. So this project was actually made before iOS 13, so it just doesn't have one, which is fine. No, we don't need it for anything that we're doing here. And then finally, we'll click on the cell. And again, make sure that you're clicking on the cell here, not like the collection view, not the content view, but like the actual cell. Again, same thing with the table view, a little finicky. And we'll choose our planet collection view cell. While we're on the cell, we also need to give it an identifier. So just like a table view has, or a table view cell has, the collection view cells also have reduce identifiers. They work in basically the same way. So I'll just go up to my attributes inspector and let's just call this planet cell. I think that's fine. If you really wanted to, maybe you have a planet cell that's in a collection view and maybe a planet cell that's in a table view. You could also call this, like planet collection view cell. I think for us, since we only have a collection view, planet cell is fine though. Okay, so we need a way to actually get to our settings view controller here, which is going to be from that settings button up here. So let's add a navigation controller so we can get the navigation bar up here. We'll jump into I'll click on the collection view controller circle right here. And then we'll click on the embed in button. And then we'll embed it in a navigation controller. So then from here, we can add a bar button item into the navigation bar. So I'll just search for like bar or item, also pulls it up fairly quickly in the search in the object library. Just pull it up here. to this top right corner. And then we could use an SF symbol, but that system item it's just got that add, which is just faster than finding the plus icon as an SF symbol. So we'll just use that system item as add right there. So from here, we can make a segue from our bar button item over to the settings view controller. And we're going to hit present modally for the segue. And we're going to kind of come back to this. It's going to be kind of an ongoing, I suppose, conversation here. But what we're going to do is we're going to change it so that it doesn't actually have this presentation style here, but instead it's going to have the full screen presentation, which is sort of, it used to be the default where you can't just drag this down. I'll talk about why, but to begin with here, we'll just click on the segue here, just anywhere, whoops, anywhere on the actual arrow itself here. And then this presentation right here, we're going to change it to full screen. And then I'll also at the end kind of talk about if you did want to do something like I have in my solution project, how would you get around the same problem with using this done button here?
Can you reword that question?
Which part?
Do you mean like if to use the done button, or you mean we don't want to use it?
Well, I'm saying we're going to kind of do it a different way than what we have here. I'm going to say, or what I meant was, I'll talk about if you wanted to do it like this, where you wanted like this look specifically with kind of this card view, how you could still make it work. It being the thing we haven't talked about yet, so I'm kind of leading you on here a little bit. So don't quite worry about that just yet, and then we'll talk about.
Can you do it to where when you click the button, the switch, it also dismisses? Is that what you mean?
No, that's not the problem. The dismissing isn't the problem. Again, just wait on that, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, finally here, what I need is to set my initial view controller of my navigation control, or I need to set the navigation controller rather as the initial view controller for the storyboard scene, or for the storyboard, so we'll check that.
I might have missed it. Did we set an identifier for the segue between the collection view and the settings view?
No, we did not.
Okay.
Yeah, we in this case we don't really have to. We're not actually going to be passing anything over there. It would be a good thing to do, just because that's normal, but we don't have to in this case. So just for the sake of time, we're not going to do it. Okay, does anyone need me to go over anything again before we move on? Okay, cool. So if we look at the settings view controller, it's made for us, but there are no outlets or anything. So we're going to need to make outlets for our button, or rather the switch and our done button here. So let's open up the assistant editor here. Doesn't matter on which side it's in, but let's just jump over to here. And now we can actually make our actions and outlets here. So the only outlet we really need here is to our switch. This switch is in a staff view, so make sure again that the switch is selected, not the staff view itself. And I'll just control and drag over from there to our settings view controller. And let's call this should show Pluto switch. Okay, are you guys getting this issue here?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yep.
I'm glad we're all getting it instead of just like all of you guys and me not having the issue for some reason. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the identity inspector of my storyboard scene right here. I'm going to delete this class here, hit enter. So there's nothing there. And then I'm going to re-enter the name here. Settings view controller and just hit enter there, and that should fix it. Generally, that's going to fix the issue. Let's try it. Should show Pluto. Oh, interesting.
I've been getting that error for the past like 2 days, and I have to just restart Xcode, and then it works. It's
Okay.
really weird.
All right, let's.
Sometimes the clean will fix it too. I saw that in a video.
All right, let's try clean here. Okay, I'm going to quit Xcode real quick.
The object you were putting in said settings view controller. Is that right? Shouldn't it be
right here?
UI switch?
The object here is where that's coming from. The type here, though, will show that I am using a UI.
Okay.
Yeah, great catch, though. That's a great thing to take a look at, but in this case, we're fine.
What did you name that again? Okay.
Should show Pluto switch. Yep, looks like that fixed it. If anything here, let me just copy this over to you guys. What you could try doing if it won't let you go that way is, whoops, is paste this into your code first and then drag the circle that way. Sometimes it'll let you do it like that. It's a little finicky sometimes. Thanks for the help though on the clean and the quitting Xcode. And then we're going to add an action from the change or from the should show Pluto switch and one from the done button as well. So I'm just going to put it like under my viewed load. And in fact, I'm actually just going to get rid of this prepare for segue here just so I don't kind of have that taking up space. I'm just cluttering up my code. So I'll just drag this in and I'm just going to call it change should show Pluto. It's kind of a long name, but it's descriptive and that's what we like. And then I'll just call this done for the action of the done button.
What field did you connect change should show Pluto to?
This switch as well, it's just an action instead. So we have both the outlet and the action here. From that same switch.
A quick question about the sender.
Yeah.
I've already forgotten which project it was, but there was one project when we added the out, or the action, we needed to specifically set the sender as the seg.
Yeah.
So when can we use like any and just use any, or when do we need to specifically set the sender?
Yeah, great question. So for the segue, that unwind segue, that's the only time where it's like a hard and fast requirement of, if you want this to be an unwind segue, it has to be, the sender has to be that UI storyboard segue. Other than that, really what the sender lets you do is it gives you really easy access to the thing that you are, essentially using to create that action. So it would give you easy access to the switch itself. So if, for example, you didn't have to use the switch anywhere else in this class here, and it was just a quick, button one-off thing, then you could say, well, the sender is actually a UI switch, and then you could access the should show Pluto switches properties just by saying sender dot whatever. So it's just like a very nice way to easily kind of get access to the thing that triggers the action. So there's no reason that you couldn't change this after the fact. That is one thing about these actions that you can change in code, and you don't have to like remake the action or anything. So if you want to use that, when you create the action itself, it gives you the option, hey, do you want this to be any, or do you want it to be UI switch, or you can just remember and kind of do it yourself. So the only time where it's really required is for those unwind segues, and that's about it. But if you want to use them, it can be kind of a great shortcut in a sense. Did that answer your question, Hunter?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So while we're still over here in the assistant editor, I'm also just going to come over here and go over to my Planet Collection View cell. We need to make some outlets from our image view and our label here. I'm not quite sure where that's there, that palm tree. But. So I'm just going to go into my cell, drag these in. I'll just call this image view. Oh, there it goes. That was weird. And name label. Just like a lot of things, the name doesn't particularly matter. It's just what makes sense to me. We feeling okay so far? Any questions, comments?
I'm getting that same issue you did, so I'm just having to restart Xcode.
Okay.
Give me a sec.
All right, no worries.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, it's not recognizing it in my class either.
Okay, yeah, maybe just quit Xcode and open it up again, and that should fix it, hopefully. So I'm just going to talk here. So don't, for anyone that's still fixing their code, just listen as much as you can, and I'm not going to be writing any code, so no rush. So we've kind of talked about MVC a little bit more this week, and we've got the concept of model controllers, so we kind of have this more full picture of what MVC is. So really, we have this view that is a cell. And what information is it going to be showing on the cell in relation to MB and C? Like what information gets actually visually displayed to the user?
The name and the image of the planet.
Yeah, the name and the image of the planet. So basically that whole planet itself. So what we can do is we can, you may have seen this in some of your afternoon projects, where we can actually give a reference to our model in our cell so that it can sort of set itself up. And this allows for like a really nice, I guess, clean implementation of your cells, and by extension, the view controllers. I can't remember if I already talked about this, but there's kind of this running joke that MVC actually stands for Massive View Controller, because it is basically the place where you put a lot of your code. So anywhere that we can kind of offload some of the code to somewhere else, in a place that makes sense is kind of a good thing. And it just keeps our code even more modular. So as an example, for a table view or a collection view that has a custom cell, we could actually kind of just leave the job of setting up, the image view's image to be the planet's image and the name label's text to be the planet's text or the planet's name. We can kind of leave that up to the cell. And so what I want to do here, I am going to now write some code here, and I'll give you guys time to catch up if everyone is still trying to fix that that outlet issue. But I'm going to write var planet is of type planet optional. And so I'm just going to say this is the planet that the cell should display in its views. Right, so on this one, it's like for this cell, if this was Earth, I would give my cell the planet Earth, and then what we could do is make a function in our cell to say, hey, can you just update the views of yourself, so your image view and your label, and it would just sort of do all of that work for you. And all of that work that would happen normally in the self-row index path, where you're setting up this cell and what it should look like, you really just kind of give that responsibility over to the cell instead. I'll kind of show you how that works here. So let's just make one of those famous update views functions. And we can say, or let's see, it's called imageview.image equals our planet dot, whoops, lowercase planet dot image. And then our name label dot text equals the planet dot name. Have we talked about the didSet property observer?
No, but it was in a
project.
Okay, it wasn't a project. Okay, let's formally talk about it now. So a didSet is sort of similar to the get and set. We looked at getters and setters earlier. However, instead of it being something that gets called when you try to get the value of the planet, it's done when after you set the value. So there are two property observers. So we're going to open and close curly braces here on the planet. Then I'm going to say did set as one word here with a capital S for set. And what this says is anytime the planet's value changes, run this code. So after the planet's value was set or did get set, then it'll run some code. So it's just a place where you sort of as a supplement to just setting the value of planet, you can also run some extra code on top of that. So it would be like maybe if we are a person class, we have a var is at home property. And maybe as soon as you get home, you have a did set that says, as soon as you get home, I'm going to take a shower or something. It's just like immediately as soon as you get home, that's set to true. The did set would be take a shower or something like that. It's just kind of a side effect that happens just because of you changing the value of something. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Okay, so all we're going to do here is just call that update views function. And what's going to happen now is basically, if we have this cell, I'm going to say, hey, cell, here is the planet that you should display. Here you go. We'll say, cell.planet equals some planet. And immediately it's going to be like, oh, sweet. Now that I have this planet, let me just go ahead and throw all of that planet's information directly onto the image view and the labels so it can be displayed to the user. So it's like a very quick just sort of chain of events that it gets the planet and puts the information onto the views for us. It's just like not we don't have to call a lot of code. It just sort of is a chain reaction that does that all for us.
Are we using did set because we're not using like the cell for row at type function? We're not using the index path. Is that what we're doing? Is that the difference?
So we will use it, and I'll show you kind of what this ends up doing in that cell for row index path. So hold that question. I think it'll become clear in just a second. Question in Slido, why is var planet an optional again? Yeah, that's a great question. It's because as soon as we create the cell, it won't quite have a planet yet upon initialization, but it will, we're going to give it one a little bit after that. So it's just like, you order some pizza, you don't quite have the pizza yet, you have to wait for it to get cooked. It's just, there's a little bit of an in-between from like when you pay to actually getting the pizza in a sense. When the planet value changes, is that referencing all the different planet pictures? So no, so that is just, we have to think of this as this one planet variable corresponding to just one cell. So there's going to be, you know, like 8 or 9 instances of this cell, and each of them is going to have their own very specific planet that they correspond to. So when I change one, it will only change, you know, when I set the planet of, you know, cell 3 or whatever, it will only call the update queues of that specific cell, if that makes sense. Let's kind of keep going here. I think this is going to become a little bit more clear once we finish out this whole collection view process here. So let's go to the collection view controller now, and we can actually talk about the similarities and differences with collection views and table views here. The first thing that we'll notice is the boilerplate code is more or less similar to table view controller boilerplate code in that there's a lot of it. I want you all to like hone in really, really carefully here for just like 1 minute, because this is something that has messed up students in the past in their sprint challenge tomorrow and with collection views in general. So just like pay attention here, even if you're not caught up with what I've got, I'll come back to it. Just like hone in for just a second here. Stay on this page. I'm gonna go to the storyboard real quick. When you in the storyboard create a cell here, what it actually does is it will register it with the collection view, and it says, hey, this is a valid kind of collection view cell that you, the collection view, are able to display. It's kind of done for you though. And the thing is, if we look in the viewed load, this collection view.register, it's kind of almost trying to do that same thing with a different cell. And you don't need this here. If you try to use this code, it could, in theory, and probably will, crash your app. So when you make a collection view controller, this is what you would have to do if we weren't using a storyboard. But since we are using a storyboard, delete this line of code, always, for now. Use that as kind of just like the rule for now, and then when you get into you know, programmatically creating cells, that's different. But for now, just always delete that. You don't need it because the cell is already registered through the storyboard. That's kind of like the biggest thing there. That's it. Like hone in time over. Are you guys cool if we take a 5-minute break here, just a couple minutes early? All right, let's do that. See you guys in a couple minutes here. Welcome back. Did anyone have any questions come up during the break that they want to ask while we're waiting for everyone to hop back in?
Can I go back a little bit?
Yes.
Planet collection view cell.
Okay.
When I tried to connect the label to this, to make those outlets, like nothing happened at all.
Did it say like it couldn't be connected to this class or something?
I didn't get the error message. It just wouldn't, like I couldn't do the outlet.
Interesting. Let me, what you might need to do is jump into the storyboard then and make sure that you have set, so if you click on the cell, make sure that the class is set for the cell as well. Right here.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then now you should be able to drag them over.
Is having the cell kind of taking care of setting itself up in the way that we did? Is this a common practice that we should be doing going forward, or is there a reason to use the other way that we did it?
No, I would say this is, personally, I think this is a cleaner way of doing it rather than, well, I'll show you kind of where this ultimately ends up being used. But yes, the way that we've done it here is fantastic for both collection views and table view cells.
Thanks.
I would much prefer to see this as opposed to just doing it all kind of the way that we've previously done it. All right, so let's actually talk about setting up our collection view, the data source and delegate methods here. Again, there's a lot of boilerplate here, so I'm just gonna kind of get rid of a little bit of it. We don't need this prepared for segue, so I'll get rid of that. And then we get our collection view data source methods, and excuse me, after we get this all set up, I'll kind of go through these commented out methods as well. But this is hopefully looking very similar to you. So number of sections in, not table view, but collection view. Number of items in section. Instead of rows, the cells are called items as far as these delegate methods are concerned. And cell for item at index path. Other than that, they work the same, which is awesome. Including that we can delete the number of sections in collection view if we just want one section. So we'll go ahead and remove that there. Let's get rid of that. And then where are we going to get the information for how many cells we should have in our first section, or really our entire collection view here?
From the planets array that we're going
to see? And where is that? You're right. Does anyone remember where we put that?
Model controller.
In our
model controller, right? We have it in our planet controller. So we need to just create an instance of our planet controller, just like we did last time with our model controller. So I'll just say like let planet controller equal planet controller. We'll just initialize it immediately. So then from here, we can just say, let's return as many planets as the planet controller's array of planets has. So we'll just do planet controller.planets.count. So we should get 8 or 9 cells depending on if Pluto was included or not. And so from here, we see a very similar thing. We say let cell equal collection view, DKey reusable cell with identifier for index path and a return cell. So again, behavior is basically the same. The only difference, however, is that the reuse identifier is using this constant up here. The reason that this constant exists is because it was also this same identifier was being used down here in that register thing that I told you to take out. So to make sure that the index path was the same throughout in both places, they made a constant here. If you want, you could put the real reuse identifier right here and just leave it as it is. Or you can just pull that out and treat it exactly like we've been using for a table view. Either way is completely fine. I tend to prefer to just remove this. I think having this as kind of this external global variable, even if it is private, is a little bit weird. But that's just me. I'm not saying that's necessarily bad per se. I mean, Apple did write this, but I tend to just say, let's remove that and just keep it more consistent with like our table view code. And then I'll just go down here to my reuse identifier and instead just put planet cell right there. I'm gonna put that on a new line. It's just a little bit kind of hard to see here. Okay, what's the thing that we have to do when we have a custom table view cell?
Create an extension for it? Or no, that's not what I'm thinking of.
It's labels and or set planet to the planet item that we have.
Right, yeah, so let's grab a planet here. Let's say planet equals planet controller dot planets index path dot row. And then if we want to pass that planet over to the cell, we could say cell.planet. Oh, okay. Why isn't this working?
We didn't downcast it. We didn't tell it where to take it from.
Yeah, we didn't tell the cell that it was a planet cell. All it knows right now is that it's some kind of UICollectionView cell. So let's do that, exactly that. Let's downcast that to be a planet collection view cell. And then let's just unwrap that here. So we'll say guardlet cell equals that. Else, let's just fatal error here and say cell is not a planet collection view cell. Something like that. Oh, geez. And so I'm sorry, that sucks. Where do you want me to go back to? You're muted.
I was looking at the code. I'm popped back up.
You're good. Okay. Sorry about that. That sucks.
Sorry, I tried to get him, but
people these days, dude. So now, once we've cast that as a planet collection view cell and we've unwrapped it, now we should see cell.planet does actually appear, and we can say cell.planet equals planet. So I'm just going to pull up the assistant editor. You don't have to. I just want to walk through what's kind of happening here. We've got our table or our collection view controller over here on the left, the cell over here on the right. So what's happening is the collection view controller is going to grab a planet from our array of planets. We're going to give it to the cell, and that planet property is this one right here. So as soon as we set that planet to, Mercury or whatever it is, then that did set automatically gets called, and it calls the update views to set the image and the name label. And what that effectively allows us to do is not have to do it here where we say cell dot, name label dot text equals our planet dot name. It's already handled for us. All we do is we give it the planet and it fills itself out. Does that difference make sense? Kind of what's happening here now as opposed to what we have done in the past? Any questions on that?
Maybe just explain it one more time for me, please.
Mm-hmm. So assuming that we didn't have any of this code over here, normally what we would do is we would say something like cell.namelabel.text equals planet.name and cell.imageview.image equals planet.image. And this code is essentially, you know, the view controller telling the cell, you know, what needs to be inside of the label and the image view respectively. However, this is just, again, kind of making our view controller code even that much more large. And if you had a complex cell, you may be setting multiple, you know, many more properties. So what we do instead is we say, well, let's just give the cell the entire planet instead of kind of individually giving it the name here and then the image here. We'll just give it the whole planet object right here. So that gets passed into this variable. And as soon as that variable is given to the cell, it will trigger that did set and say, oh, I've got a new planet value. The collection view has literally given me a new planet here. I'm going to just go ahead and call the update views, and we can see here, this is the exact same code that we have over here. Well, it's reversed, but that's besides the point. There we go. And so it's the thing that's doing all of this setup here. So now all we have to do is just give the cell the planet, and it will put the image and the text in the views for us. It's really just like shifting responsibilities to someone else. That's really the only thing here. The code that gets run is the same. It's just where we run it is a little bit different. Any other questions or comments on that?
My planet controller array is not being recognized as something to call here.
Okay. Make sure that that's a capital or a lowercase p on planet controller, or it should just be whatever you called it up here.
That's where the planet controller itself.
Oh, like right here. Interesting. Do you have the planet controller.swift file? Mark, you muted. I don't know if you know that or not.
I do. Yes.
You have that.
Yeah.
Okay. But it won't recognize it up here at all?
No.
Can we take a look at your screen?
Sure. All right. So, what am I doing wrong here?
Nothing. Hit Command B for me.
Command B.
Okay. I don't know why that's not highlighting, but it looks like that's fine. Oh, on line 40 there, it might just be kind of because it actually can't build the project. Put a guard at the start of that line on line 40. Okay. Identifier, cast it out. Okay. Try hitting Command B now.
Command B. Build. Okay.
One more time. Okay. Yeah, you might quit Xcode once and reopen it and see if it will then give you kind of the syntax highlighting, but everything you have is fine if it's building correctly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I had that same error actually where Xcode wasn't syntaxing at all and closing and reopening worked for me.
Yeah, I don't know why it does that. It seems like Xcode 11 has been a little bit buggy in that sense specifically. Quite a few times as well. Okay, so at this point, we should, in theory, be able to run the app and have our collection view work. So hopefully you see at this point, there's not really much else that a collection view has that a table view doesn't have. And here we're running into the problem that I said we were going to have with our cells, which is that they're massive. So this is one issue that you'll run into with CollectionViewCells because they're a little bit different than some other views. So as an example here, and this is why I was surprised that it actually put Earth the way that it looks right here. Cells try to accommodate the size of their contents as opposed to trying to make the contents kind of accommodate the size of the cell. So they're a little bit different in that sense. They won't kind of just clip everything out. They'll literally try to expand if we don't tell it, hey, you need to be exactly this size, then it will just try to expand. And for example, these images are fairly large and higher quality than, or at least pixel size, than the cells are. And so the cell is trying to expand to accommodate that whole size of this cell, or of the image, and make it basically not shrink the image, but rather expand the cell. So in order to fix this, we need to make it so that the image view cannot expand. There's a few ways we could do this. We could do it in code. We could give a constraint to the image view itself and say, hey, you can't be bigger than this. For us, let's just do something like this. Let's say if we go down to the Add New Constraints menu, this isn't necessarily the best solution, but if we have time, we can talk about better ones. It's not a bad solution either. It's just not maybe the most optimal thing for scaling. Is I'm just going to give a width constraint to my image view here. And if I do that, what I'm saying is you have a hard stop of 134 points. You can't grow any larger than that. Or you have to be 134 points, so it won't expand past that. And then we get something that looks a little bit better here. But now we see it's, functional. Oh, I don't know why I made that a plus sign. That should have been a settings. Sorry. I wasn't really thinking there. You guys need to call me on that. I definitely didn't make a ton of mistakes as well.
I'm sorry, I did not see what you did to reconstrain that.
Yeah, no worries. So select the image view here and then go down to the Add New Constraints little pin menu down here. And you'll just want to check this width right here. I can't make a line or else it'll go away, but we'll do this. Just want to check that width right there. And then hit Add One Constraint.
And then just leave the 134 value?
Yeah, just leave it at 134. Just whatever it is right now, that's what we'll leave it at. And then just hit Add One Constraint and you're good to go. And then you should be able to run it and have it, look a lot better like that, more or less. So I want to show you something real quick. Just watch me here. Your build's failing. Okay, I will check that out in 1 minute. If I were to make my cell a little bit larger here, and again, you can just watch me, sometimes it'll put it right in the center. And really what that means is the cell literally doesn't have enough space to put more than one on the same sort of horizontal space here. Oh, that's weird that it didn't actually take that there. Oh, you know what? Let me try something. So the size of the cell essentially dictates how many can be on, one sort of horizontal space at a time, right? So if I were to make my cells smaller, then I could maybe fit 3 at a time or something like that. So it's completely up to the size that you give the cells that dictate, how many can fit horizontally. That may be somewhat obvious, but I felt like it was worth mentioning anyway. Okay, Harmony, what is yours saying?
It's saying something to do with the identifier planet cell must register a nib or a class. But I thought I did that, so that's why I'm not sure it's not working.
Let's just have you double check and make sure that they match up. So something that I'll do is I'll just go into the storyboard and just copy, literally hit Command C here, copy that identifier, and then I can paste it exactly into my reuse identifier space here and know that I haven't messed that up because I do that all the time. So you'll just want to make sure that what you put in the reuse identifier in the storyboard matches whatever is in this self or item index path here.
All
Yeah,
of the
it's matching.
Oh.
Sorry, Harmony, what?
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say it's matching, but it's still giving me the error. I guess I'm not sure why, but
Okay. Do you mind sharing your screen? We can take a look.
yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's what it's saying down in the bottom.
Cell. Okay. Can you go to your? Let's go to the collection view file first. Find that cell. Can you scroll up a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that all looks fine. All right, let's go over to the storyboard. So yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. Can you Command Option Shift K for me?
Yeah, 1 second. Okay.
Sorry, I know that's kind of like a.
Yeah. Is that what I'm supposed to do? That's
Hit stop there. Let's try running it one more time. Okay, hit the stop button and then run it, but don't actually click on it in the simulator. Just let it pull itself up. So just hit the play button, but don't.
Okay.
Like don't click the app in the home menu. Okay, yeah, it is still not working. Very interesting. Yeah.
I did a clean on it too. That didn't work either.
Okay. Let me take a look at it maybe after class. I know this definitely isn't the best thing, but I'll send you what I have now so you can continue to follow along. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to just, if you wouldn't mind just sending me that project so I can take a look at it and see why it's not working. I'm not quite sure off the top of my head.
Sure, thanks.
Super sorry about that.
Was it not the identifier? I saw it said could not DQ view of something. I didn't catch the rest.
No, yeah, the identifier is the exact same.
Huh, okay.
Because the collection view is being built upon a view controller.
No, that wouldn't be the issue. That's a good guess, though. Yeah, I don't know. I'll take a look, though. So I threw that in the iOS 16 channel if you want to grab that. Again, I'm really sorry that I have to do that. I always feel bad about not being able to actually solve the problems in the moment there. Okay, so can you guys give me like, we'll do a poll here. I just want to do a 1 to 3 on how you feel with setting up a collection view and really just what we've done here. All right, that is live.
I'm having an issue in my simulator. All my views in the collection are stacked up on top of each other, and you can't see any of the text labels. I don't know. It seems like an auto layout issue. I don't know.
Okay, yeah. Can you share your screen and we can take a look?
Yes, just one moment.
Oh, yeah.
So here we are.
That is weird. Will you click on the cell in the storyboard? Okay. Can you click on the size inspector? Yeah. Okay. Click on the. Interesting. Yeah, that looks right. Can you click on the content view? Right here.
Is that this one? Oh, the content view. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's weird. Can you click on the image view? Top, bottom, name label. Well, your aspect ratio is 1:1, but I don't think that's the actual problem. So I don't know. You just change this multiplier here. Just yep. Or you can just type it out yourself. I don't know why that didn't work.
Yeah, it's beach balling. I don't know if you can see on that end.
Oh, okay. Try running that now, although I don't think that's going to be your issue, or it's going to fix the issue.
Did you check the estimate size on the collection view?
Oh, that's a good thing to check. We didn't touch anything with the collection view. Go ahead and click right there in the attributes inspector. Oh, the automatic, yeah. Sorry, it is actually in the size inspector. My bad. And then on that estimate size right there, click that.
That should be.
Just try custom there. I don't think it. Mine's on automatic. Okay, let's try that though. Just try running it now. Let's see if that fixes anything.
Hey, there we go. Cool.
Good idea, Kenny. Thank you.
Thanks, Kenny.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, guys. So let's jump back into this. I'm going to leave this as a plus button just for the sake of time here. But let's talk about now getting this all working with should Pluto be a planet here. So let's go ahead and talk about user defaults now. Pull some windows over, sorry. Yes, I'll definitely send some resources on custom layouts and all that stuff. Let's do, what were we looking at? User defaults. So as far as user defaults goes, it is a way that we can, like it says here, store key value pairs persistently across launches of our app. So you could think of user defaults as a dictionary of key value pairs. So like some key has some value, just like a normal dictionary in code would be. However, it's like that dictionary actually gets stored on the phone's hard drive, so it can actually be accessed, between launches of the app to do whatever whatever you want. The thing with this is this can be very easily abused, and this often gets abused by new iOS developers. So we're trying to teach you the right way to use it, as opposed to instead trying to store all of your app's data in user defaults. It's not really made for that. So like it says here, the default system allows an app to customize its behavior to match a user's preferences. And that's really what it should be used for. And that's about it, is user defaults, user preferences, or settings, essentially. So, as an example, whether Pluto should be a planet or not. That is a setting that the user would want in their app. And that is a valid reason to store some of that information. What is not a valid reason, or not a valid thing to store, would be like all of the planet information. That's not a setting, that's just your app's information. So this would be something like if you have a bunch of different themes in your app and you want to let the users select which theme they want to use, so that the next time they open the app, it still stays on the same theme. That's a perfect use for user defaults. Things of that nature are really what you should use it for. If you use it for anything else, it shows a lack of knowledge and experience, as if I was like interviewing you. So that's really kind of my spiel here, is please don't use it or don't abuse it. It's really easy to use, and that's why I think it does get abused. But just think, is this some sort of setting or preference that the user would have? If so, go for it. That's totally cool. If not, maybe want to use something else, like even using File Manager like we did a couple of days ago. So this is a good section to kind of remember. And again, using documentation is killer. I'm trying to use it as much as I can to get you guys in the habit of realizing that it's a good thing as much as I can. It says a default object must be a property list. That is, these are the only things that you can store essentially in user defaults. Data, strings, numbers, so doubles, floats, doubles, floats, bools, etc. Dates, arrays, or dictionaries. Anything else is a no-go. It basically has the same limitations as File Manager does, in a sense, or at least the property list encoder does. And generally, this is fine. For example, the should show Pluto, it's just a Boolean, it's just a number, it's a 0 or a 1. So that's a setting that we can totally save in there, and that's completely fine. There's really only two methods that you'll use, or two kinds of methods, I guess I should say. So we call a set some value, for example, this should show Pluto, on or off, bool, for some key. And that's really all we have to do. So we're going to say set. So like we see here, setting default values, it's set some type, and really this ends up being basically the same function. And then as far as getting the values out, it's some object. So we're going to use, like today, bool for key, because that's what we're saving. So we just give it some key for that dictionary value, and it returns the value out. So it's really, really similar to using a dictionary. So let's take a look at that. Let's go to our settings view controller here, and let's get this to actually work. So in this change should, that's a tongue twister. Change should show Pluto. We want to set whether Pluto should be a planet or not in user defaults. That's our goal here. As far as how we do that, we need to access user defaults. So we'll say user defaults. And this also, just like we saw with File Manager, has a instance already created for us. This time it's called standard. And remembering the names of all of these shared instances is a little bit weird. So again, documentation is a killer reference, because it will tell you right here, this is the instance that you use. Or for File Manager, it would tell you default right there. So then we're going to say set some value. Because this ends up being the same function, you don't actually have to scroll down to find the set bool. If that's what we're setting, you can use any of these because it ends up being the same function anyway. So what bool should we put in here? Where are we getting that information from, whether we want it to show or not show Pluto in the settings view controller?
The switch is on or off.
Yes. perfect. So a switch, I know we haven't looked at a switch, at least in a guided project. Its property is called isOn, and that's the bool that will tell you whether the switch has been flipped or not, or is on or not. So we're going to say should show Pluto switch dot isOn. I think naming bools are a really hard thing to do, but that I think gets the point across. So then we have to come up with a key. The key is just a string. I want to show you a really nice way of using keys specific, well, kind of with user defaults, but you could use it in other places as well. We need to write some key here. So, and it's a string. And what have we said about strings? We kind of tend to avoid them where at all possible, right? We don't tend to like them because they're really easy to mess up. So what we can do is write the string once and then use it with some nice autocomplete features. What we can do is if we can just put this like at the, well, no, sorry, I'll do this in a good way. I was gonna say we could put an extension at the bottom, but let's make a new file so that it's actually kind of clean here. So let's make a new Swift file. And we're gonna call it settings keys. And this doesn't really fit into anything with like MVC or anything. So for now, I'll just put it in my resources group. That's a fine place to put it for now. And hit create. And all we're going to do in here is make a property that holds that string so I can reference the property without messing the string up potentially. And a really, really nice way to do this is to actually make an extension on string itself. And then we can make a static variable. We can call it whatever we want. I'm going to say should show Pluto key. And then we can say equals should show Pluto. The string itself doesn't really matter, and neither does the name of this variable either. We just want to make sure that wherever we set the value, we also use that exact same key to pull the value out. That's really kind of our main goal here. So now in doing this, it makes it so it will kind of do some really cool autocomplete functionality here. Does anyone need more time to write this out?
So what you've written here specifically does the provides the autocomplete functionality?
Yes. So let's take a look at how that works. So let's go back to our settings view controller. And really the whole goal here is to make it so that I don't have to go should show Pluto key. And like, that was honestly not even an accident here. Like for me messing up should here, that was just what I wrote. And if I didn't catch that, if I was just kind of blazing through my code and just trying to, go quickly, I may have missed that and that would be an issue. So again, we try to avoid that situation where at all possible. So now what we can do is, if I back this up a little bit, this for key, it knows that it should be a string. And the cool part here is we just made an extension on string. So what I can do is I can actually just do dot should show Pluto key, just like that. And now there's no way I can mess that up. Or if I do, right, it'll yell at me because it's obviously not going to autocomplete and it's going to say, no, there's no variable called that messed up name. So do you have to do it like this? No, you could write out the string yourself. It's a little less complex than writing out that whole extension there. However, I think the little, 1 minute, 30 seconds that it's going to take you to write that extension and that variable in it is going to save you some potential trouble and headache later when you're debugging, or if you even need to debug at all because you wrote this well. Any questions on how this is working here?
I have an error actually.
Okay.
It's not letting me. Like I put the dot syntax and it's not coming up, and I typed it out and it's still not coming up. It gives me an error.
In your extension, is this static here?
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Do you want me to share my screen so you see, or?
Yeah, let's take a look here. Okay. Okay, pull that out, just the dot should show Pluto key. Try writing string dot should show Pluto key. I think you're kind of having the same issue where your just autocomplete isn't working.
Sure, just restart.
Yeah, let's just quit Xcode and try it.
Could you remind me what static does?
Yeah, so it makes the property exist on the property or function exist on the class or struct, and instead of needing an instance of that class or struct to access the variable, in a sense.
Got it.
So it basically allows you to use that dot syntax?
Yes.
Okay, it's working now.
Awesome. The reason it lets us use that dot syntax as well is because it knows that this key is going to be a string. So just because of type inference here, we could have made the variable just right here and that would have been fine. But since it knows that it's, hey, this is a string and it can only be a string, since we put that variable in an extension of string, then it just knows, oh, you're talking about a string. So what I had Akmal do is string.should show Pluto key, and that would also work as well. It just turns out that just kind of like enums that we talked about in the first week, because of type inference, if it's expecting a string, you can just kind of get rid of the string at the start there and just use that dot syntax. Yeah, great question on, you don't understand why there has to be a key, how it relates to the is on property. Is that key saving this should show Pluto switches on? Yeah, so what we're doing is we're saying, think of it as a literal, like we're almost writing a English dictionary here, and I'm saying the key is should show Pluto, and the definition is either true or false based on, you know, whether or not we want Pluto to be a planet or not. And so what happens is that sort of gets saved. I'm like literally writing it in the book. And then what can happen is I could close the book, I could get out of the app, and I could pull the app up again, open the book, look at that specific key or the name of that word, that definition, and see, oh, they want it to be true. I can actually pull that out and use it and know, yes, they do want Pluto to be a planet or not.
So is it saved inside the project?
It's saved inside of the phone's hard drive somewhere, in a plist somewhere that we don't have access to. And that's why it's able to persist between launches of the app here.
When the keys were created for us when we were using file manager, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, Codable was doing that for us. So really, that's kind of all we have to do in here is just say, hey, I want to now say that Pluto is or isn't a planet. And that's kind of it here. So let's handle this done button here. And really all we have to do here is just say dismiss. We talked about dismiss a couple days ago, right? Anyone need a refresher?
Yeah, we did.
Okay. That's just going to drop this view controller down when I hit this done button, that's all. The one thing that we do need to figure out though is if I run this right now, and you can just watch me here, I haven't saved anything yet. However, by default, the switch is on, even though if I run this, like Pluto isn't in my collection view here. So it's just because in the storyboard it's set to ons, but it doesn't necessarily match what we actually have in user defaults. So we should probably fix that. We should probably make it and see, hey, let's actually open up that book and take a look at that specific key and see whether they want Pluto to be a planet or not, and make sure that the switch itself matches up with that. So let's make a update views function just to kind of keep things clear. Really, the biggest reason for using update views specifically in a view controller is because it's really easy to get in the habit of just throwing a ton of code in the view.load and just like as just like a catch-all, like, hey, I want to run some code. But if we can separate it out into functions, that's a little bit cleaner, and then we can just call those functions in update views, and it's a lot less just like dense code that is perhaps unrelated. So let's pull the value out of user defaults. So I'm just going to say get the, I'm going to say get whether Pluto should be a planet from user defaults. So we're actually going to pull it out now. We've saved it here, but we need to see, like, should Pluto be a planet or not? So I'm going to say let should show Pluto equal. And then we're going to use that kind of second set of functions here, the getting default values. So we're going to use this bool for key. So we just give it that key and say, hey, can you give me the definition at this, at this word essentially? So we're going to say user defaults dot standard dot bool for key. So we have to say, hey, this is the specific word I'm looking for, or the specific definition I'm looking for. So I'm going to say dot, again, should show Pluto key. There's no way that I can mess it up without it yelling at me, at the least. So then this will give us whether or not they want Pluto to be included. And what we can do then is we can say our should show Pluto switch dot is on equals that should show Pluto. So we're just basically taking that, passing it over to our switch and saying, hey, you need to match up with whatever the user wants in user defaults. So when we run this now, well, after we call this function, it would make it so that by default, if we haven't set anything, it'll be off. Lots of little edge cases to think of, right? But the more and more you kind of just build apps, but also just run them and see like, oh, that isn't quite matching up. The fixes tend to be, fairly small as far as things like this go. So let's just call the update views in our view.load. And run this. So now if I hit the plus button, it should be off. Or maybe if you were flipping the switch a little bit and maybe that yours is on, so try flipping it off and then stopping the app and running it again and see if it goes off. Although mine is not. Maybe I was just quitting the app too fast. Yeah, I think it was. Any questions or comments from what we've done here in our settings view controller? You feel okay with user defaults so far?
My should show Pluto is always. I mean, I switch it off and then I go back, but it doesn't. It doesn't retain the value.
Doesn't. Okay. mine was kind of doing that too. You might just try to switch it off, or yeah, switch it off, let it go for a second, like let the app run, and then hit stop and run it again. I think I was flipping it, hitting stop too fast, and it wasn't actually able to save it in time.
Mine isn't showing Pluto in the picture. Did we not get there yet?
No, we haven't got there yet. Mark, I'm happy to take a look at yours in a second. I think we should be able to move on and at least finish this out, and then I can check.
It's fine. Yeah. Keep
So,
going.
so I have a quick question on this. This should show Pluto. Basically, we're grabbing that from the user defaults, and then we're saying is on should be what we're grabbing from the defaults.
Exactly.
Okay.
Just making it match up with, you know, whatever setting that the user has put in user defaults, that the switch itself actually matches up with that. So they're not like, you know, the user wants it to be off, but the switch says it's on, and then they're kind of like mismatched, right? We just want it to kind of all be pointing to, again, a single source of truth is kind of our goal here. Yes, we'll do another example right now of user defaults. And after that, if you still want to ask about something, please let me know. So we, again, need to use user defaults to make it so that Pluto actually shows up here. Right now, only the switch is really the thing that's looking at that. So let's go over to our planet controller here. And what I want to do is I want you to grab this whole var planets here. So everything inside of the class planet controller, but not the planet controller itself. And just take Command X to cut it, because we're going to need to paste this, but we're going to kind of write this a slightly different way. I'll show you how. So then I'm going to say var planets is an array of planet. So it starts out being the same. However, we're going to make this one a computed property. And then you can paste in that array that you had previously. And just so we don't get confused, because like these are both named planets, and I think that can be a little bit weird, I'm going to change the name of this planets variable inside to result. So we've got our array of 8 planets by default. And then what we can do is, let's just check if we need to include Pluto. So again, we're going to use that user defaults, just getting the default values. So we'll use one of these. You know, if we were fetching a dictionary, or yeah, a dictionary from user defaults, we'd use dictionary for key, or a float for key. But it all uses the same thing, where the key is that literal key. It's the thing that makes it so that I know where I'm saving something to, but also where I'm saving something from. It's like if I gave you the key to my mailbox and said, I live in apartment 116, then you would say, oh, I know where to go to get the mail, and where also to put mail, I guess, if you were putting mail in my mailbox. But the key is the thing that lets you know, out of all of the mailboxes, or out of all of the definitions in the dictionary, which one we care about here, right? And it's just some string that we give it, just some identifier. So let's say, again, let should show Pluto equal, whoops, Pluto. We're going to say user defaults dot standard. Can you give me a bool for the key that I'm going to give you, and tell me, is this true or false? So again, we'll use that dot should show Pluto key. And again, that's coming from that extension we made. So then with this Boolean, how could I use it to add a new planet to this array of result, or this array of planets here? Any guesses on this?
Append?
Yeah, but I only want to append if should show Pluto is true. So how could I write that out? You're right. Yeah, you could just use an if statement, right? Just say like if should show Pluto, or if you want to be sort of more explicit about it, you could say if should show Pluto equals true. Then we could just say result dot append. Then we could just make a new planet here called Pluto. And the image name just needs to be Pluto lowercase. So only if the should show Pluto is true, then will it append it. If not, if the user doesn't want to see Pluto, just skips over that if statement and it won't actually add anything to the array. And at the end, we just need to return this result, or the result with Pluto as well. So we'll return result here. So now that this is a computed property, sorry, I'll get to your question in 1 second, Cody. So since this is a computed property, this is going to run that check every time that we try to set up the table view, essentially. It's a little more complex than that, but when we say, hey, reload the table view, then it's going to say, oh, I need to go take a look at my planets array. And the planets array is going to say, oh, let me compute this and figure out, do I need to include Pluto or not? So it's going to run that code over and over again. So even, while the app is running, we reload the table view, it's then going to say, oh, yeah, Pluto needs to be included, or no, it doesn't need to be included. Cody. Did you have a question?
Actually, it's sort of a question right along with that. Do we need to write a second method in that if statement for if it's false, just in case, say you click it on, you decide that you don't want it, then go back, wouldn't Pluto still be appended into the results array?
Great question.
Wouldn't you have to write a deletion case?
No, at least the way that we've written it out here, it's just going to try to set up the table view again and then restart with a brand new array of these 8 planets and just not have that. So it's almost like we're replacing the array over and over again, which isn't the most efficient thing to do, although for 9 things in an array, it's not a bad solution. But if we were dealing with something a little bit more complex, yes, then we probably would want to remove it from the array. And that's really all there is to it. It's just a matter of setting some values like we did in that switches action and then pulling the value out somewhere else, to do whatever you want. In this case, add Pluto. So the final thing we need to do here in order to make it work, we could run it and it would work, although once you flip the switch, you'd have to rerun the app to see the change. We're going to go into our collection view controller. And we don't actually need the view to load here, so I'm actually just going to get rid of it. But we are going to call the view will appear. And we're going to call super view will appear animated. If you're a little unfamiliar with this, just because of time, I'm going to refer you to that video I made. It's in iOS 16 just from a day or two ago on these lifecycle functions. And I'll talk about why we're using view will appear as opposed to view did load though. But really the only thing we need to do in here is just say table view, collection view, reload data. It also has that exact same function to just recall number of items in section and self-row at index path at the least. Excuse me. So while you guys are getting that, I'll go ahead and run it here. So I don't have Pluto. If I switch that Pluto should be a planet and hit done here, I should now have it in my collection view. I can pull it back, turn it off, and it'll be gone, and so on. So the reason that I wanted to do this specific full screen presentation style here is one, because of time. What happens is if I have my, well, here, let me do this. I'll put a breakpoint right here so we can see when this kind of happens. If I hit done, then I'm dismissing that view controller, that settings one, and it's about to show the planets collection view controller. And so it hits this line of code here, and it will reload the collection view, which then triggers the planet controller figuring out whether Pluto should or should not be a planet. The problem is, or actually I'll leave that here, and you can just watch me do this. You don't have to do this along with me. Problem is now, if this is on just that card style presentation here, if I hit done, it doesn't call that function. And so you would need to do something a little bit more complex. So like if I uncheck that I want Pluto to be a planet, hit done, it's still there. Oh yeah, and then it's not matching up, so it's gonna crash the app. So what you kind of need to do here is you need to either just choose, okay, I'll use the old full style presentation like we have, most really out of a lack of time. Or what you could do is you could implement the delegate pattern to communicate and say, when I flip the switch, then the delegate, which would be the collection view controller, needs to reload the collection view. But obviously we just don't have quite a bit of time to do that. We're already over time again. So if you want to kind of know how that would work, feel free to Slack me this afternoon and I can show you or give you some code with it, but it would just be like implementing a protocol, a delegate protocol like you've seen before to do that. Okay, sorry again for going over time. I'm really trying, but I'm sure Ben will do better than that, than me at that. Are there any last questions before we finish up the project?
So I had one question on the collection views.
Yeah.
So since it's basically they're forming the cells from our array. So anytime that array is updated, it's just going to re-render everything. Is that what's going on? Like it's going to add any cells? Like if something was added to the array, it would add another cell and re-render, or it would?
Pretty close. Really, the thing that would trigger that is this reloading the collection view, because it's going to say, oh, whoops, sorry. It's going to say planet controller dot planets, and that's going to trigger that computed property to run again.
Oh, okay, I see. So then that's when we run that reload data, then that it just basically goes down and takes the count for the array again, and yeah, okay.
Exactly. So as soon as you try to access the planet's value here, basically as soon as the value is got, or you're trying to get the value, it reads it and it recomputes this whole thing. That's kind of how that's working. Later on, you will learn, however, how to do something more like what you were saying at first, which is as soon as something's added, it could reload the collection view or anything you want, but that will come in like unit 3. So that's more responding to a direct change to this array. All right, any other questions? Okay, do we feel okay with user defaults and collection views? Okay-ish. Okay. Make sure that you use the help channel. I'm looking in there. I'm obviously doing things, but I also, poke in there every once in a while. So if you've got questions, reach out to your TL, reach out in the help channel. Let us know if you need any help, and we'll get you sorted out. Okay. Okay. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a great afternoon. I'll talk to you later.